Going on a roller coaster.
Dawson?
Are we on?
Yes, we are.
Good to go.
Wonderful. All right. Welcome, everybody. Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar dedicated to discussing how to embrace change through adaptivity and resilience. My name is Jocelyn McGovern, and I'm with the team at ThinkHuman. I'm located in downtown Manhattan, and for any of you who are not located in New York, the weather today is absolutely breathtaking, so I'm feeling not only grateful to be alive, but also to be on this call with all of you. So to begin to connect with all of you, I'd love to know a little bit more about you. As you are joining and settling in, if you can please type in both your name and where you are dialing in from into the chat. And if you're having trouble locating the chat, it is located on the right-hand side of your screen. Oh my gosh, the first person is from Long Island, which is actually where I grew up, so I immediately feel connected to everyone in this chat. We are seeing people on the West Coast, East Coast. This is moving really fast, and I'm incredibly grateful to see every single one of you joining. So we never know how these conversations are going to unfold organically in the next 60 minutes, but given how relevant this current topic is, I know that the conversation is going to be incredible, so I encourage you to continue to be participatory in the chat. For those of you who have been engaged in our previous webinars, you know that oftentimes some of the most incredible conversations and transformations really do happen right in the chat, so please continue to be involved. And please know that everyone who is in the process of commenting, your presence is felt, and each and every one of you are appreciated, and this conversation would not be the same without each and every one of you, so thank you for joining. So to move over to the topic for today, which is embracing change, I would love to get the conversation started. If each one of you could please comment in the chat what embracing change means to you. How over the past couple of weeks have you had to embrace change, embrace resiliency, and become adaptive, either in your personal life or professional life? Please let us know in as few or as many words as you would like. We would love to know what it is that you are bringing to the conversation and how resilience and change shows up for you. So real quick, in light of Memorial Day, I personally want to extend a very quick but very deep thank you to any servicemen and women or families of servicemen and women who are joining. We are eternally grateful for the sacrifices that you've made and are honored that you are joining. So speaking of Memorial Day, that is a poignant and fitting transition to what it means to embrace change and resiliency. So for a final bit of housekeeping before we dive into our discussion, I want to introduce our awesome partner, Bravely. Bravely connects employees to on-demand professional coaching in key moments that define the employee experience. And of course, ThinkHuman, which is a leadership development and manager training company that drives lasting change and habit formation in leaders at all levels. So now in the following poll that will pop up on your screens, both Bravely and ThinkHuman would love to connect with you all further. So if you could please choose which organization, and you can also select both, that you'd like to hear more from at the end of the conversation. If you would like to equip your managers with tools to do their best work conducted through virtual workshops and training sessions, please select ThinkHuman. And if you're looking for on-demand professional coaching for employees at every level, please select Bravely. And once again, you're more than welcome to select both, to have both organizations connect with you at the conclusion of the webinar. So now I'm going to turn it over to Anna, our moderator, who will be leading our discussion on how to embrace change.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. And by the way, I just want to shout out to everybody who's like putting in incredible things in the chat. They're really moving and they're really generous and just like a willing to be open and seen. Thank you very much. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome everyone. We're really happy to have you here today. So we're going to talk about adaptability and resiliency. And now, it was important before this quarantine, but now especially it's incredibly important. And the question we also have is, how do we build and embed this? So we have an incredible panel of experts. And I want to delineate that we have experts that know about adaptability and resiliency. And we've all never been through a pandemic before. We've all never been through a quarantine like this before, or the kind of enormous changes that are going on day to day. And so the panelists are going to be speaking about their particular experience of resiliency and adaptability. And no one really is an expert. We're all doing it the best we can along with you all. So I just wanted to give you that little caveat. But we have an incredible panel of experts sharing their road-tested experience and stories and taking your questions about resiliency. And before we get started, I wanted to give you just a few tech items. In the right upper hand corner, you should see a button for gallery view. It's sort of like Brady Bunch view, and that's certainly dating me for anybody who knows what Brady Bunch is. So do that so you can see everybody. And you all already know about the chat icon on the bottom. So let me introduce the panelists. We've got Hakimia Jackson, who's a Bravely coach, and much, much more. You'll hear her speak. Thank you. You also have on the panel Tayo Roxon. He's the DEI specialist and a popular TED talker. We also have Sarah Sheenan, and she's the co-founder of Bravely. And then we also have Meredith Haberfield, who's the founder of ThinkHuman and my boss and an incredible human being. And so again, to get involved in the conversation, submit your questions. It's just as much your conversation as it is ours. In fact, it's more so your conversation. So please ask questions, submit your comments. We're really interested in what you have to say. And with that, we'll start. So I'm going to pose a question. First, what is resilience? It's a word thrown out a lot. And what do you mean, or what do we mean when you say it? And Hakimia, we'll start with you.
For me, resilience means the ability to bounce back from any type of emotional, physical trauma, and you use that experience to, catapult you or springboard you into improved performance and growth. It's being able to use that pain so that you can walk forward in the direction that you've most, deeply desired.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely.
Can I jump in with something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just build on what you said, Hakimia, which I absolutely embrace all of it, and just add that resilience and grit can get confusing between the two. Grit, this idea of like pushing on and having the tenacity to keep going, which is critically important, but different than resilience. That, in my view, resilience has within it not just coping and pushing on, but healing and being able to expand from the experience, not just survive it. And from that expansion, that it like pushes us forward and propels us in some new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that a lot. And what I would say is, I think resilience is the ability to grow from the effects of constant change. And constant change as it pertains to physical, psychological, and mental, but the ability to grow, cope, deal, and adapt is a unique skill set, because it's all encompassing in the sense that, everybody inevitably experiences change, but then not everybody either grows through it. And with growth comes healing, but also self-discovery. And so then you tap into something, some depth, some, inner wealth. If you think of, if we just watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, any athlete, there's something that they have to tap into when the tank seems empty, and like it dug deeper. So that ability to grow from that is how I'll define that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would just add to, in this moment, resilience is showing up different for people on a daily basis. Sometimes I think we can all relate to having a couple of great days and then hitting the wall. And it's really important to figure out, when I think about how to just merely, get up and get on my Zoom calls some days feels like a huge feat. Other days I feel like I'm crushing it, right? And so resilience it's in this moment, it's showing up quite different than I think we've seen it before. In the past, I would have thought about it surrounding, this pandemic is certainly a huge event, but day to day, it's kind of Groundhog's Day for each of us right now. But then not at all, because we're struggling with different things on a daily basis as our emotions change, as we face different challenges. And so resilience is kind of fluid right now in terms of what we're facing and how we're needing to approach each day differently.
Yeah, I love the idea of what you're saying, which is making space for all of it and understanding that there's a wide spectrum of where you'll be at depending. There are some days you won't be able to, it'll take you 4 hours to even get into the bathroom. And then there are some days you'll just be like a superstar and crushing every single thing, and that all of that is okay. To move
Akimia, did you want to say something? Because were you jumping into something?
I was going to say, because, previously, if you think about it, we've had opportunities to escape it to where we didn't have to address it, right? I can escape and I can go to work, or I can escape and I can go to happy hour outside of my walls. But now it's like we have to experience it all. We can't just run somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would also add, I don't know if this is contentious or not, but to me, resilience right now is a concept that we are like sowing the soil for, but not really, like we're still in the middle of a crisis. Like we're not on the other side of a crisis, even though people are starting to, go back to work and go outside and these new things that are shifting. I think the emotional landscape for people is still in the middle of not only like a health crisis, but a emotional and business and economic crisis. And so I think in my view, we're talking about resilience to prepare for it. And so the soil for it versus that it's appropriate to be there yet when we're still actually in it.
Yeah. So to get a little bit more personal for just a moment, let's talk about, if we can, sort of the structure or how resilience and adaptability gets built. When has resilience made a big difference in your life? And with just a few words about what it was in that particular moment that made such a difference. And anybody who wants to take that can take that.
I can go. So as I reflect on my life, which is one of the big core components of resilience, is I was born into crisis. I'm from Nigeria. I was born into a military dictatorship. And there's an interesting thing that happens with conditioning. You're born into the world, and before we transition to civilian rule, you already know certain rules, like don't do this. If you do this, this happens. You're thinking about this before you can walk, before you can run, and even before you can formulate words. You're observing how people are reacting to certain things when the news comes out, when the siren is on, all these things. And I didn't understand this then, but upon looking back, you start to learn, inevitably how to react to, to either lessen yourself or expand yourself. And so resilience showed up for me. Hi, Siren. Resilience showed up for me.
Like perfect soundtrack.
And perfect soundtrack in that moment. But then right as we transitioned to civilian rule, my dad's job started to take us to different parts of the world. And then I was now this kid who was figuring out his identity. So 5 countries, 4 continents. Then I came to America, I graduated, and I had this immigrant experience where I was perceived to be something I wasn't, but I was treated like someone else. I was perceived as an African-American, but I was treated in private institutions as a Nigerian in America, where I didn't get, jobs or opportunities, and I had to deal with that juxtaposition. And so for me, I guess, to answer your question, it showed up at an early age. I just didn't know it was showing up. And then for me, resilience has always been dealing with the juxtaposition of extremes and understanding that it is possible for 2 things to happen at the same time, despite what the world thinks. And I I guess I'd been training for that. And so when I was dealing with the rejection and all those things, I started realizing that I needed to really trust myself that I could come through this. And it's always happened for me. And just understand that that inner knowledge of self is what will eventually get me out of there. So.
What I hear you saying is that with these extreme circumstances that went on for you, where you ended up finding your most balance was in your own self and actually figuring out what that meant for you and then following that.
Yeah, because I had started to make all these things had become normal for me, right? You know, because when I would come, I remember, when I was 17, I moved to Virginia. I moved to Virginia in a town called Lynchburg, as that was my first time in America.
Yeah.
And I remember having to, get all these questions where like, oh, your English is so good and all these things.
Tayo,
And
I want to interrupt for just a second because I love what you're saying. And I also want to hear from everybody else. It's amazing. Because I know that Kimia wanted to say something as well. Yeah.
Sure.
My lesson started early, and it came from an intelligent woman who had me at the age of 16, and she didn't graduate high school, nor did she have the credentials that we are so very proud of, and we must get. She taught me a lot. Having 7 kids, living in an environment where I was constantly discounted, and a future was already created for me, if you should say. But I learned through that experience, I didn't become a product of my environment. My mother had to sacrifice. She did certain things that were, illegal to make do, and to ensure that her household was taken care of and to protect us. But with her drive, her focus, and her wanting to prevent us from creating that generational curse, she showed me, what really mattered. And with that, she always told us, we're not, we may be from the hood, but we're not of the hood. And what that meant to me was I can walk in whatever room, from, the rooms of the hood to the boardrooms, and be the person that, God designed me to be. And that was brilliant. At least that's what I believe. So when I walked in those rooms and they didn't want to hear my voice and I was silenced, or where I just felt beneath, or they tried to make me feel like I was beneath them, I still, like Tayo, I had a voice, and I recognized that I didn't need the outside world to confirm that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Meredith, I can't hear you, Meredith. Yeah.
Sorry. What, like my own personal relationship to this is that for the early part of my life, I really had my orientation to the world was like, let me see how much a negative emotion I can avoid, and like skim the surface of like, just have things turn out and like have it go well for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a pretty good job at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, great, I'm winning at life. And then in my 30s, my first child died. And it was like crushing, humbled me, like flattened me to my knees, like to my, like beyond. And what came from that for me was firstly, realizing that there was like dimensionality and depth to my experience of being alive that I had never known before. That it was like, there was like a whole world of experience and emotion that connected me to myself, and actually unexpectedly for me to other people. Like, oh shit, I was like really skimming. And then finding how to not just get through that, but have it not leave me less than I was, but like still hold all of my son and my relationship to my son and be whole myself.
It's so vulnerable and so generous. And so like what I'm taking away from what you just shared is that resilient, in fact, what everybody is saying is the resiliency and adaptability requires us to actually take in everything that's happened and allow it to change us.
Yeah.
You didn't cut off to any part of that pain. You actually let it influence you and turn you into like who you are and who you were becoming, and that it exposed you to a whole world of connection to others as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful, like incredibly generous. Thank you. Yeah.
Such a beautiful
Yeah,
story.
it's a
All of
beautiful
these
story.
are, like, touching my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, one of the most difficult times in my life was last year, when I had difficulty. I'm 43 and I decided to have a baby very late in life, and struggled to get pregnant with my partner. And so I went on the journey that many women have to go on, in terms of fertility, and went through the IVF process. During the same time, I was raising money for my company, and it was just an extraordinarily challenging time, because right when I got pregnant, our fundraise fell apart, which meant we had to start anew in terms of like going out and flying back and forth to the West Coast. I had a high risk pregnancy because of my age, and then I was actually hospitalized in my 6th month of pregnancy while still raising money. And I was responsible for all of these people that worked for me. We had to make really tough decisions and eliminate some of the roles. And I remember thinking, all the while putting myself into bankruptcy, paying for fertility treatments, right? So I didn't go bankrupt, but, just financially strapping myself, right? And you start to understand like where your ceiling is. You're layering on stress, right? And for me, the learning was I decided to show up as who I am to all of the people that I work with. We tend to do that in our personal life, but I had an intention to allow myself to take my mask off and show up to the people in my professional life so they knew what was going on with me. And I believe, to this day, that's really what got me through it. And I think that, the point around resiliency is that we have to find where we can draw energy, strength, inspiration from. And, I believe that vulnerability, all of what's happening right here in this conversation, is one of the first steps in building resiliency in ourselves, is inviting in empathy and asking people to support us so that we do have the strength to come back each day. Because I'll tell you, in that moment of my life, it felt like very difficult for me to reset on a daily basis, but it was because of those people that I opened up to and surrounded myself with that I was able to do it.
Yeah.
And today, by the way, I have a 6-month-old baby. My business is thriving, and we can come out of the darkness.
Yes.
Yeah. What I'm hearing everybody, like the through line or the thread through what everybody's talking about is that resiliency and adaptability is not something that happens just like by chance. It's actually something that it's sort of like the lotus flower, how the lotus flower gets born inside of basically crap, it's like the dirt and the crap of the, of the sewage. And that's how this flower gets built. And so that's how it is. It's inside our own pain, inside of the challenges that we're up against. And then that's where it actually starts to grow. And thank you. It's like the vulnerability and the openness of everybody on this panel has just been really, really beautiful. And there's a lot of people who are sharing inside the chat about 9/11, about their own experiences. So thank you.
Anna, Paul asked the question, Paul Park.
Yeah.
He said, how do you practice opening yourself up more and being more vulnerable to others? I think that's a really good question. For me, Paul, I think I've allowed my vulnerability to be my strength. When I share, I call it my testimony. I'm giving an opportunity for me to release that shame that was once tied. So when I shared that story about my mom, I was ashamed of that, guys, because I was bused an hour away for school, which was at a predominantly white school. And most parents were already in their 40s or 50s. And my mom comes 21, 25, years old. So I was ashamed of that experience, but it helped me release it the more and more I talked about it. And the more I seen that other people really appreciated my story. So Paul, you have a story. When you release that shame, you give people the opportunities to say, hey, maybe you can do this, and provide recommendations. So
I would also add to that, Akimia, that especially right now, I keep saying that there's an opportunity here for all of us to lean into vulnerability. And if it's difficult for you, Paul, I would try and frame it in your mind. Like, I know for myself, if I know that I'm helping someone else, things become easier for me to do rather just making it about me. And so one of the things that, or one of the tactics that you can use here is to think about how, if you're modeling this for someone else, like if you're showing up and sharing your story first or being vulnerable, like Hakimia has just done for all of us, that allows us the space, or creates the space for us to share. And so in doing it, you're actually empowering other people, which is incredibly needed right now, given how, some people really struggle in sharing their reality because they have, a multitude of fears. And so what we need to do right now is cultivate that safe landing for everyone.
Yes.
With Paul, what I would say is it's very important right now to really be reflective on what your conditioning is as opposed to what your values are. All right. And so what I mean by this is I certainly had a lot of imposter syndrome, when I started to share my story. And the moment for me that was the turning point was I had a near-death experience, at the age of 22. It was a car accident. I was driving to a place of work I didn't like. And all of a sudden, boom, my life is there. Car is in shambles. And I'm like, I haven't done anything I said I wanted to do with my life. And I'm here in a job that I hate. I already accepted the narrative that has been told to me. And for some reason that opened up and released all the shame that I had. And I started telling my story. Would you believe that was the first time that I acknowledged that I lived under 2 dictatorships? To me, it was so normal that I didn't even think of anything of it. I thought it wasn't special. I didn't even think me traveling and moving in 5 countries as the son of a diplomat was also something normal. But it was up until that moment where I was forced to be vulnerable, I just realized all that I suppressed, because I had been conditioned to not, share your story. It's not about you, all those things. And your metric of success, at least for me as a Nigerian, if anyone is a West African here, you understand, doctor, lawyer, engineer, or failure. And so that was kind of my thing. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, none of that matters. I almost died, and I haven't even scratched the surface of touching what I said I wanted to do as a kid. And so I just started sharing the story. I started with my blog, and then it became my podcast, hence the mic. But the beautiful thing that happens is you start to understand, to Kimia's point, is that your story is your testimony. A lot of people get into this imposter syndrome and they say, I didn't have a near-death experience. I didn't have a tough childhood. I didn't have this. Why does my story matters? But the thing you have to understand is, if we live in a world of 7.5 billion people, there are many people who think similarly. And so the fact that you say something is going to trigger someone else's response, and they're going to be like, that person said something that I've felt, and that just gave me the bravery to do something. And then you have community, and then you have empathy. And then when you have empathy, you find that they're not the only one, and everybody else realizes that resiliency is something that connects people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
There's a comment, Anna, from Brad, this notion of bringing one's whole self to the workplace.
I was going to bring that up. I'm so glad you did. Yeah.
I found to be quite difficult as an introvert. The risk just feels so large. Brad, this is something that comes up. So we support tens of thousands of employees at Bravely through our coaching, right? And it's on demand. It's all about that employee coming forward to talk about whatever's going on with them. And this in particular is something right now that so many people alongside of you are struggling with, because if you, on my team alone, you know, I'm a new mom, I'm homeschooling my 8-year-old stepdaughter, I left New York, I have all of these individual stressors. There's someone on my team who's having their first baby, someone who had to cancel their wedding. Like, everybody has all of these extenuating, very specific circumstances alongside the stress that we're all collectively feeling, right, with COVID and the economy. And vulnerability literally is like, the definition of it is like sharing to the point of risk almost. Like that is something that you are going to come up against. But, you know, the only thing I can really say to encourage you again is just this idea that, you know, facing the fear and allowing yourself to share can open up so much for you right now in this moment in particular, because nobody can really help you adapt or provide you the support that you need if they don't understand what's happening with you. And I've seen time and time again, when you are willing to take that risk, how it allows other people and empowers them again to do the same. And like, just look at what's happening even on this call, right? We're all starting to feel like this sense of community within a very short period of time. And
Right.
that's something that you can cultivate yourself.
Mhm.
I'll just add in that I think it's baby, tiny steps. Not taking like a giant leap into the deep end necessarily, but just like one small baby step. And then it's like, as somebody personally who would like to always look like I have my shit together and I'm doing well and I've got it handled and let me like take care of you, I don't want to share myself. I make it like, it's going to sound a little hokey, but almost like the way we relate to pushing ourselves with exercise, where it's like, I can do just one more rep. Like I can do just that. I don't have to do that much more, but just like a little bit. And that one little bit is like, okay, I like survived that.
Yeah.
And I can take another step.
100%.
Great point.
Yeah.
So this is now that I feel like we've delineated what resiliency and adaptability, some of the things that actually are required for that, how do we, and there was one of the questions, how do we actually bring that into the work space? How do we embed that in the culture and in our leaders and in our teams? Because we are in a completely brand new world right now.
Mhm.
Who wants to take that on?
Yeah, I think first it starts with the vision of the team and the mission statement of the organization, and strategically, what does it look like for you dealing with resilience every day? If you first start with, okay, what do I want to accomplish with resilience? Is it just so that I can get my team back to work again, or is it because I mean, let's be real, I've heard clients say this. I feel like they're pushing us back just to get to work rather than being truly concerned about my well-being.
Mm-hmm.
What is it, right? That's that first step, addressing or conquering any type of denial as it relates to what we're going through. Look, because you're not experiencing it directly doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledge it for them, right? Some people just want to say, I understand, and that's it. And then from there, what does it look like from a value proposition perspective? Do we need to reassess and add some things in to it that relate to what these times look like?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tyler.
No, I was just saying, yes, I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah. I think, the work begins with looking at our ideology from an organizational perspective. Does it create opportunities for us to, one, be vulnerable, for us to have that community, for us to be authentic and bring our whole self, for us to be creative and adaptability? Are you offering opportunities for your staff to retool themselves or reinvent themselves, or to just operate in the space of meaning and purpose, so that they don't feel like they're worn out and I'm just doing tasks just to do it?
I agree with Akimia. So if you're thinking about doing this in the company, you got to think about how the world is created. Every babies model parents. We model what we see in the media. We model, all these things are models. And so if you as a leader are creating a company, I often tell companies when I'm consulting with them, I say the number one thing that you have to understand is in a company, it's comprised of people. You are leading people. I think a lot of companies forget that particular component. And so you tend to not to humanize them. And so if you're leading people, that means emotions are involved, and also means you're dealing with nuances. Not everyone's the same. You can't apply a cookie cutter approach. So there has to be that authenticity, but also that culture of allowing mistakes to happen. When you think about, dealing with resilience, some people don't show their whole selves because they're afraid of the consequences of making a mistake, right? So if you make a mistake and fired, and obviously there are mistakes you can make that you deserve to be fired. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about making a mistake on your way to becoming better, all right? And so if you don't make it okay to make a mistake by even confronting and talking about your experience, it's often not been modeled. And then there's a certain culture that comes with team building. You can facilitate an environment where you offer trainings on, things like emotional intelligence, things like conflict resolutions, things like leadership. And then in addition to that, I would say if you practice a level of big picture thinking where there's always an idea of how everybody's role plays into the smaller picture, that will inevitably expose people to multiple ideas and multiple teams, which will lead to the community effect. I mean, Anna was talking about this. People are connecting based on stories here. And so when you create an environment where people are exposed to different people are going to find themselves in those people. So that's how I would say that.
Thank you, Tayo. Yeah. Meredith.
Okay. I heard a lot in what both of you just said about this. I would say yes to modeling from leadership, that if leadership isn't walking the talk, it's very hard to embed anything in an organization. I think both with leaders modeling this and giving individuals the skills for individual resilience, not gonna find business resilience without individual resilience. Sometimes business resilience can be mistaken for revenue bouncing back or like just surviving the situation, but I don't believe that is the accurate definition of business resilience. Business resilience, like individual human resilience, is we not only survived, but from the experience, we expanded and grew in meaningful ways. And so that starts with the individuals in the business being able to do that personally, or else they can't bring it to the business. They're just like heads down pushing through. So that leadership of self that the leaders can model and that you can embed in your organization. I mean, those are trainings that we at ThinkHuman lead, but it's also something that anybody on this call can start embedding in your own organization through conversations. I think leadership of self includes, I can talk much more deeply about these things, but I think big picture, acceptance of what's happening, like acceptance of giving up control and acceptance of emotions and acceptance of owning your own story. And then embracing paradox, which is like having the ability to hold both sadness or pain and happiness, one giving depth and one giving height. And so like not just blind, stupid optimism, but that paradox of both, and then having a real commitment to growth as an individual, growth as a team, growth as an organization. And so I think bringing those three pieces, first to self, and then to team, and then to organization.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It's sort of, I think everyone's already said this, but acknowledging the reality of what's going on. Like, you'd be surprised how many leaders aren't doing this, and the space won't be created unless you enable people to talk about what's really going on. And then I believe that it is the responsibility of leaders to go deep with their employees, to not just say, how are you at the beginning of a one-on-one or even a team call, to really go around the Zoom and find out, what are you struggling with? What is preventing you from doing your best work?
Right.
And then once you can identify, for me, it would be, I have 2 kids. I don't, have the ability to do the things that I was able to do 6 months ago. Right. And so if, unfortunately my co-founder is great at this. So he helps me figure out, what are the things that he can do in terms of removing barriers that are holding me back. And leaders need to do this for every single person on their team. Yeah. How can I, if I have parents on my team, do I need to say to them, there's a 2 or 3 hour period during the day, go devote that to your children. I understand that you may not be as productive as you've normally been right now, but we will figure this out. You take care of you, in this moment, right? And so you've got to know what's going on with people before you can help remove those barriers for them. Incredibly important in terms of decreasing their stress. And then finally, we can all think back. For me, it is my 8th grade English teacher when I switched schools and didn't know anyone and was sitting alone at lunch every day. She recognized something in me and showed me appreciation. She recognized my talents. She made me, I knew that she believed in me. And she is the reason that I was able to go to 8th grade every day, because she supported me. And so be Mrs. Blacker to all of your employees, because you don't know what they're struggling with. But if you are one-on-one appreciating them, across the organization, recognizing them, you may be the only reason that they're able to get out of bed every day and come to work, but you've got to be intentional about that.
Yeah. I think that's important, Sarah. One thing I want to add to that is when we support our staff, it's not, from a one-size-fit-all perspective. It's getting an understanding of how can I support you. So you're learning, you're redefining things that you thought you knew and saying what looks best in this situation. From what I've seen, from a lot of leaders, it's, oh my God, I wish I can just throw out the same thing and it just works right now because I have a lot on my plate. But you really have to take time and say, okay, this uniquely works for you, this doesn't, and here's how I'm going to embed that into my schedule.
Yes, I think that so speaks to, oh, sorry, Taya, do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
I think that so speaks to the urgency of emphasizing emotional intelligence in people leaders. I mean, in everybody, but especially in people leaders, that right now, yes, there is work to be done. And the work is, I don't downplay it. People's economic health is dependent on the work getting done. So it's a virtuous circle that it gets done. It's not like, oh, that's bad that we're prioritizing work in certain conditions. I mean, in certain circumstances, but having managers be equipped and well trained to do both, to see that people are set up to do the work, but that they're also in good shape to do the work.
Yes.
And that they have the skill and investment from the company so that they can do those two things.
Yeah. And I have what I want to add, and this might answer your question, Leah, because I know you have a question about exposing struggles. What I've been doing, especially with my job, is just study leaders. And if I'm looking at how leaders around the world are approaching COVID-19, I think, I'm going here to Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand. The ones that have been able to acknowledge, accept, and say what they don't know, as opposed to blame shifting, are the ones that have been more successful. And here's what I mean. And so a lot of times there's this idea, and I know you talked about this, Meredith, of needing to be perfect, but what people need right now is just realness and authenticity, right? So if you
not perfection.
Yes. So if you come up and say, even Governor Cuomo does this sometimes, if you come up and say, look, I don't know what the future is, I'm scared, right? You said you overcome the fear of exposing struggles. Just acknowledge what you're feeling, because it's that idea of it's weakness to say that is not true, because everybody else is going through something. And if you then try to provide an answer for something that clearly the world doesn't have an answer for, you're going to come across as even more detached, whether it's something that you intend or not. And so acceptance, first of all, and then saying, based on this information, this is how I believe, this is what I believe we can move forward. And so a lot of, resilience comes from vulnerability and acceptance. And that is not, something that goes away when you're in a team setting or when you're in a group setting. It's the same thing. I keep going back to sports. We're down 3-1, but we got one more game. I don't know if we're going to win, but if we win, if we score this 5 points and execute what coach does, we we might get there. And that rallies up someone, and someone out of the bench scores 20 points, right? These things happen. But that's how people get inspired, when they understand that their leader and their teammate is in this with them and is being present to the current situation. And it's acknowledging that they're fierce, but they're showing up anyway. So that's how you do it.
Hakimia, I feel you're like chomping at the bit to say something.
I'm agreeing with them. Being present is very important. I just want to say how we do it here, at least for me, and what I've advised my clients is to create a new normal every day, whatever that looks like. Best practices are, to me, thrown out the window, and we're creating practices every day. So don't beat yourself up about it. Exercise compassion and know that you are human. During this time, I'm sorry, you're not all knowing and you're not all doing. And you have to accept that. It's okay. Look at Meredith. Go ahead. I'll let you.
No, we're all going to church right now. We're literally like, say it. That's right. That's right. Keep going, girl.
I'm sorry. I got in my zone, y'all.
Oh, no. Be right in your zone. We all got like all excited. Absolutely.
I got especially excited, Hakimia, about practicing self-compassion. I just think that there's like no end to the depth of that well. And like every time I think as a leader, like, oh, I'm like covering that base, I'm like, oh no, there's more to go. And it can get confusing for me sometimes, like self-indulgence versus, oh no, that actually feeds everyone if I first go there, being kind to myself, recognizing I'm doing the best that I can. And that for now is enough. And I just also want to jump on, in terms of tactical things that we can not only be doing for ourselves and leading ourselves, but also for our people and supporting our people managers or people leaders to make sure they're doing it, is focusing on our overall emotional fitness or emotional wellness. And stress is not just like a psychological phenomenon, it's a physical one. So having, like talking about it in team meetings, giving people leaders like little, bullet points to talk about with their teams about the importance of, there's a full emotional range of things that people might be feeling right now, and they're all normal, whether it's like joy, silliness, distraction, disconnection, grief, sadness, and all of it is totally okay. And that not to feel ashamed or embarrassed if that's what you're going through, because that's what would be normal right now.
Yeah.
And that there are things to do, like make sure you're getting enough sleep and exercise and getting outside if you can't, even doing it alone, and being sensitive to negative outlets like too much media, or trying to avoid our feelings with alcohol or other things. All of that for me is in the category of practicing self-compassion, of just like, is there really attention on taking care of myself, noticing how I'm doing? Because once our cup is full, we can then tend to other people. But I really failed at that at the beginning of this COVID situation. I was like, I can be there for other people. I can make sure that they are, prioritized and that we are moving forward and carry the business through. And I, over and over again, was doing certain check the box things like exercise and meditation, but not actually checking in with how I was doing. And it had a ripple out negative effect on the entire team. And so I guess that comes back to getting real with yourself as a leader, because it's not going to get any better than that in the company if we don't.
And I want to add something to that, if I may. It's, by the way, self-compassion actually requires, we actually need to understand that self-compassion is, we've never been through a pandemic before. So we're going to double and triple down on the things that have worked in the past. And so if anybody on this panel, which is all of us on this panel, and everybody who's in the chat has been finding themselves doubling, tripling, and doing the things that you thought, and they're like not getting the results, just like understand everyone is doing the best that we all can inside of this circumstance right now.
Yeah.
Meredith, I agree with you about, just finding coping mechanisms. A client of mine this week said to me, it feels like our culture has been wiped clean, and we have to recreate it because now everyone is working from home. They're a large organization who is like toying with the idea of not ever going back to the office, right? And so it's incredibly challenging, especially for people leaders right now, to say, in the absence of this face-to-face interaction, you know, how do we support our people? And what you were just bringing up is, again, like being intentional about asking, going deep with people, figuring out, do you have the space to create these coping mechanisms? Are you focused on them so that it becomes a part of your culture? And maybe there are resources that you're providing that allow them to cultivate these things that are lacking right now, so that they can find the space to come back to center. But, you know, one of the things that I have found very interesting is when, you know, there's a lot of agility that has been required in people right now. One, we all had to like go working from home. Two, we entered the space of like, oh, this isn't changing. Now we're kind of like walking through the mud of will this ever end? And it's extremely difficult for a lot of us right now. It for me in particular, I'm struggling with this phase more than any of the other ones. But there are questions that we can ask our teams that we haven't asked in the past around, you know, how comfortable are you making or doing your work without having all the information, or how comfortable are you context switching on a daily basis? These are questions that for me 3 months ago, I would have said, I'm amazing at all of these things. Like, this is I'm for my strengths. I'm a superstar. Like, keep just piling it on. It's a very different world than I'm living in right now. I'm not capable of half the things that I used to be capable of because my circumstances have changed dramatically. And so revisiting these things and challenging even our own, what I would call misconceptions about ourselves right now, because we're not living in the same world. All of us have our new set of stressors and individual circumstances that are making it really challenging. And so having the, like it's really the courage to have these conversations with your team, I think, is critical.
Hakimi, I wanted to go back to you really quick. I love everything. I've been literally, if you see me going down, it's because I'm writing everybody's, like, it's just like these incredible points that you all are making. Hakimi, I just wanted to come back to you for a second.
Okay. I like what Sarah said, that leadership agility piece is very important. So for all the techies out there, you guys should know that we're in our fourth industrial revolution. And that just means this disruption, this volatility, this uncertainty is constant. So welcome for the ones who didn't realize that. But I think that agility, I mean, hey, we have some people out here, right? We have people that are still trying to hold on to the old way of doing things. And you have to understand that every day is an opportunity to create a new way. I'm going to continue to stress that, but that self-agility, that context setting agility, that stakeholders agility is very important when it comes to leadership agility. And working in those dimensions are extremely important for you to thrive. So right now, the stages of adaptability, level 1 is where we don't accept change and we collapse. Level 2 is survival. Level 3 is thriving. What we are here today for is to teach you how to thrive through this VUCA time.
Yes.
You know, so something I want to add, if I don't know if we have time. I can see you, Anna.
I just literally was like buzzing because of what she was just going to church right there.
Don't you say anything, Tyler.
We have a couple of minutes. I'll you go for it, Tyler.
Okay. Permission to proceed.
Yeah.
All right. So, you know, what I feel like this time is revealing in us is an opportunity to rediscover ourselves and rediscover who we work with or who we live with or who we thought we were versus who we're supposed to be. And what's going to inevitably happen is the worst of your impulses will come. So will the best of your impulses. And what I always recommend with teams, and I've been doing this for a while, but even especially now, is the implementation of something called an empathy hour, right? So an empathy hour is an hour every week that everyone in the team talks about anything else but work. And the reason why this is very important is that what you're going to find is the people that you work with have lives in a different way that you might experience. And whenever this happens with clients, a lot of what happens is people come up with, oh, I didn't realize you were this. Oh, you have that. Oh, that's the other responsibility. You're an extra parent. You're also all these things. And when you have the ability to understand who you work with, what motivates them, what drives them, how they're dealing with a pandemic, for example, you're able to work better as a team. You're also able to build a culture that is inclusive, right? Diversity guy bringing inclusion. Yes, that is inclusive, but also innovative, because you're able to say, nah, Chad won't be able to do it this because Chad has this. Let's make sure we bring this person here. And then the beautiful thing that happens is there's a community that comes about where if someone says, hey, this has worked for me. I don't know if it's going to work for you, but maybe try it. And people are just doing things without being told or prompted. That's how a company grows and thrives.
I love it.
I just want to jump on that if I can, Anna, quickly to say that's at the individual level, and how it translates out in business is that instead of just asking the individuals to push through, the individuals are sharing and growing. Instead of the business just trying to go back to how it was, using this as an opportunity for the business to get better and redesign in ways that are adapting to the world, being more inclusive and equitable and sustainable for the planet. There are lots of things that instead of just like, how do we go back to how it was? It's like, okay, well, this is a reset, and how do we thrive and do better?
This is amazing. So we have 4 minutes left, and I have a lot to do in those 4 minutes to wrap us all up. I'm going to give you 30 seconds or less to give if you could leave the audience with one practical high leverage action, what would that be? Meredith.
I'm going to say it's some personal self-reflection that you do and give to your team. And that is some exploration of the pain, challenge, anxiety, loss, and then some exploration of the growth and opportunity personally from the experience, and starting to get conscious about the paradox.
So making space for both. I love that. Great.
And doing the self-reflection with your team.
That's great.
Mine is similar to Meredith. I think we all need to come to terms with what we've been conditioned to versus what's actually reality. There are some truths and stories we've told ourselves that aren't true. So this means discovery and rediscovery of self, and matching that with your values, and making sure that you have compassion for yourself as you approach that and to adapt that to the new normal.
It's great. Thank you, Tayo.
All right, mine is an acronym that you can write down, everybody.
That's right.
It is to follow your flow. That means flexibility, listening intently, observing optimistically, and walking forward willingly.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
I think, again, it's seizing the opportunity that's in front of all of us to invite more empathy into our work lives. And that means, one, taking care of ourselves so that we have the energy to give to other people, but really leaning into that vulnerability. Brad taking that first small step Meredith was referring to, but not letting this moment pass, because we can redefine how we work going forward. And I think it's really important. And I don't think we talked about this earlier, but everyone here is like, we're going to offer a free coaching session, and maybe that's what it is that's going to fill you up, but find something or somewhere that you can go and get the support or the clarity that you need to lead or be a great colleague right now through this moment. It'll build resiliency in you and in other people, I promise you.
That's great. I want to thank you so much. I'm going to wrap things up. I want to just speak to some of the things that I heard in our hour together. Throw out best practices right now. There are no best practices. It's a time to actually create new ones. Self-compassion Empathy. I love the idea of an empathy hour that Tayo was talking about. Get present with yourself and your people. Risk being vulnerable and real. Be willing to acknowledge the reality of the situation and try not to deny it. When opening up meetings, have a check-in with people. Really check in. There are questions that we can ask our team, like how comfortable, now that there's a new world, how comfortable are you now? Reassess everything that was given before. It's a whole new reality right now. To be agile, we must let go of the things that no longer work. Thank you, thank you, thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you all for joining on the chat and for being a part of this hour. And to this community, thank you for spending time with us. We need you just as much as you all need us. And go, whatever it is that you're taking away from this, please go take this version for yourself and make it real for you in your world and with other people. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful and blessed day.
Thank you,
And
Anna.
goodbye.
You're
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Bravely.
Yes.
Thank you, Tayo.
Thank you all. Thank you, Akimia. Thank you, everyone. Flow,
Yeah, Susan.
flow, 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 flow. Yeah.
Flow.
Go and flow so you know. Grow.